The burning sensation shot through my back as the scalding coffee soaked through my shirt. I heard Adam's laughter behind me, followed by my mother's dismissive sigh. "Oh honey, just go change your shirt. Your brother was just playing around." My name is Emma, and at 16, I become used to my parents dismissing my 18-year-old brother's pranks as harmless fun. But this time was different. The pain was intense, and I could feel my skin blistering. "Mom, it really hurts," I whimpered, trying to pull the hot fabric away from my skin. "Stop being so dramatic," Adam snickered, high-fiving Dad who had just walked in. "It wasn't even that hot." Dad ruffled Adam's hair proudly. "Boys will be boys, Emma. You need to toughen up a bit." I rushed to the bathroom, carefully peeling off my shirt. The mirror revealed an angry red patch spreading across my lower back. This wasn't the first time Adam had accidentally hurt me. There were still fading marks on my arm from when he playfully pushed me against the hot stove last month, and a small scar on my leg from his funny idea to test how close he could get with Dad's welding torch. That night, I couldn't sleep. The burns throbbed, and any position was uncomfortable. I heard Adam and Dad laughing downstairs, probably sharing another joke about how oversensitive I was. Mom had brought me some aloe vera, patted my head, and told me to stop making such a fuss. By morning, the pain was worse. The skin had started to blister, and I could barely move without wincing. During breakfast, Adam purposely bumped into me, making me cry out as my shirt rubbed against the burns. "Oh please," he rolled his eyes. "I barely touched you." Mom glanced up from her phone. "Emma, if you can't handle a little roughhousing, maybe you should eat in your room." That was their solution to everything. Send me away, make me invisible, pretend there wasn't a problem. I grabbed my backpack, fighting back tears as I headed to school. My best friend Lily noticed something was wrong immediately. "Emma, you're walking weird." "What happened?" I tried to brush it off, but when she saw me struggling to sit in class, she insisted on checking. Her gasp when she saw my back drew the attention of our teacher, Mrs. Torres. "Emma, come here please," Mrs. Torres called quietly after class. Lily squeezed my hand supportively as I approached the desk. "It was just an accident," I started, the familiar excuse feeling bitter on my tongue. Mrs. Torres's kind eyes hardened slightly. "Show me." Reluctantly, I lifted the back of my shirt. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know. "These are second-degree burns," she said firmly. "And they're not the only injuries you have, are they?" I stayed silent, but my silence was answer enough. "I'm taking you to the hospital," she declared, already reaching for her phone. "This needs proper medical attention." "Please don't," I begged. "My parents will be angry. They'll say I'm making trouble." Mrs. Torres paused, her expression a mix of sadness and determination. "Emma, this isn't about making trouble. This is about your safety." The next hour passed in a blur. Mrs. Torres drove me to the emergency room, staying with me as the doctors examined my burns. Dr. Sarah Chen, the burn specialist, carefully documented every mark, every scar, asking gentle but probing questions about how each injury occurred. "These patterns are consistent with intentional burns," she noted, photographing my back. "And these older marks, Emma, how long has this been going on?" I stared at the floor, tears finally falling. "Adam says he's just playing. My parents, they say I need to learn to take a joke." Dr. Chen shared a look with Mrs. Torres. "There's nothing funny about causing someone deliberate harm," she said firmly. "These aren't pranks, Emma. This is abuse." The word hung heavy in the air. Abuse? I'd never allowed myself to think of it that way. It was always just Adam being Adam, my parents being parents, me being too sensitive. "I'm going to make some calls," Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but resolute. "This needs to stop, and you need protection." As she left the room, I sat there, wrapped in the paper-thin hospital gown, feeling simultaneously terrified and relieved. For the first time, someone was seeing the truth behind the "boys will be boys" excuse. Someone was finally saying that this wasn't normal, wasn't okay. Mrs. Torres held my hand as we waited, and I could hear Dr. Chen's voice in the hallway, speaking firmly to someone on the phone. This wasn't how I expected my Thursday to go, but somehow I knew everything was about to change. I just didn't know how much. The hospital room felt smaller when my parents burst in, their faces a mix of anger and forced concern. Adam trailed behind them, smirking until he saw Dr. Chen's stern expression. "What is this nonsense?" Dad demanded, his voice carrying that familiar tone of dismissal. "Emma, you're causing trouble over a little coffee spill." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her clipboard held like a shield. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, your daughter has second-degree burns covering 15% of her back. This isn't a minor incident." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "She bruises easily, always has. We've told her to be more careful." "Mrs. Parker," Dr. Chen interrupted, her voice sharp. "I've documented multiple burn marks, scarring patterns, and healing injuries. Some are weeks old, others months. This shows a clear pattern of abuse." "Abuse?" Adam scoffed. "I was just joking around. Emma's always been dramatic." Dr. Chen turned to him, her eyes cold. "Would you like to explain how joking around resulted in precise circular burns consistent with cigarettes?" The room went silent. I hadn't told anyone about those burns. Adam had cornered me in the garage last summer, testing whether I could handle a little heat. I hid in the marks under long sleeves, accepted his whispered threat that snitches get worse. "That's ridiculous," Dad started, but Detective Marshall chose that moment to enter the room. "Is it?" she asked, holding up her badge. "Because we have security footage from your home showing multiple incidents of deliberate harm." My heart stopped. The cameras. I'd forgotten about the security system Dad had installed last year. "The footage shows clear instances of premeditated assault," Detective Marshall continued, "including yesterday's incident with the coffee, which was deliberately heated to near boiling before being thrown." Adam's smirk finally faltered. Mom sank into a chair, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. "This is a family matter." Dad tried again. "We can handle this at home." "No," Dr. Chen stated firmly. "Emma is being admitted for proper treatment of her burns, and given the evidence of ongoing abuse, she won't be returning home with you." "You can't do that." Mom jumped up. "She's our daughter." "A daughter you failed to protect," Detective Marshall countered. "Adam Parker, you're under arrest for assault and battery. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, you're being charged with child endangerment and negligence." I watched as Adam's cockiness chattered, replaced by genuine fear, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. My parents' protests faded into background noise as social services arrived to discuss my temporary placement. "Emma will stay with her Aunt Lisa while we conduct a full investigation," the social worker explained. Aunt Lisa, Mom's sister, who'd stopped visiting after arguing with my parents about how they handled Adam's rough play. As they led Adam away, he finally looked at me without that cruel gleam in his eyes. "Emma, tell them I was just playing. You know I didn't mean it." But I stayed silent, Dr. Chen's supportive hand on my shoulder giving me strength. For years, I'd swallowed his excuses, accepted that his pranks were normal sibling behavior. Not anymore. My parents were escorted out, Mom crying about family loyalty, Dad threatening lawsuits. Detective Marshall assured me they wouldn't be allowed contact until the investigation was complete. That evening, Aunt Lisa arrived, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have pushed harder when I noticed something was wrong." As she helped me pack some belongings from home, supervised by social services, I found myself breathing easier despite the pain of my burns. The house that had become a battlefield felt different now, its shadows less threatening. "Your cousin Sophie has already set up the guest room for you," Aunt Lisa said as we drove away, "and I've enrolled you in a new school district just until things settle." I watched my house disappear in the rearview mirror, thinking about how many times I dreamed of escape but been too afraid to speak up. Now, thanks to Mrs. Torres's concern and Dr. Chen's determination, I was finally free from Adam's pranks and my parents' willful blindness. The sun was setting as we arrived at Aunt Lisa's house, casting long shadows that somehow felt less threatening than the ones at home. Sophie, my 15-year-old cousin, waited on the porch, her face showing nothing but concern and love. As I stepped out of the car, sore but hopeful, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where boys will be boys would never again be an excuse for cruelty. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway, my heart pounding as I waited to testify. Dr. Chen sat beside me, reviewing my medical records one last time. Aunt Lisa held my hand while Sophie braided and unbraided my hair nervously, a habit she developed during our late-night talks about everything that had happened. "Remember," Dr. Chen said gently, "just tell the truth." Your story is powerful enough. The security footage had been damning, but the prosecution wanted my testimony. They needed the jury to understand that behind each prank was a deliberate act of cruelty, masked by family silence. When they called my name, I walked into the courtroom with steady steps. Adam sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that made him look younger, more innocent. My parents were in the gallery, Mom clutching her designer handbag like a lifeline, Dad's face set in that familiar disapproving frown. But they couldn't silence me anymore. I spoke clearly about each incident: the coffee burns, the cigarette marks, the accidental encounters with hot surfaces. I described how they dismissed my pain, normalized the abuse, made me doubt my own experiences. And how has your life changed since receiving intervention? The prosecutor asked. I straightened in my seat. I sleep through the night now. I don't flinch when someone moves too quickly. My grades have improved, and I'm part of the school photography club. I paused, gathering courage. I'm learning that family doesn't mean enduring abuse in silence. Adam's lawyer tried to paint me as oversensitive, attention-seeking. But the medical evidence, the security footage, and the testimony of my teachers created an undeniable pattern of abuse. The verdict came 3 days later. Adam was found guilty of assault and battery. My parents were convicted of child endangerment. The judge's words rang through the courtroom. The phrase "boys will be boys" is not a legal defense for systematic abuse. Adam was sentenced to juvenile detention with mandatory counseling. My parents received probation and were ordered to complete parenting classes and therapy. The restraining order would remain in effect until I turned 18. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt. Aunt Lisa started to shield me, but I stepped forward. I hope other kids learn that they don't have to accept abuse as normal, I said clearly, and I hope parents learn that dismissing cruelty as pranks makes them complicit. Life with Aunt Lisa and Sophie became my new normal. My burns healed, leaving scars that Dr. Chen assured me would fade with time. The emotional scars took longer, but therapy helped. So did the support group Dr. Chen recommended for survivors of family abuse. 1 year after that first hospital visit, I received a letter from Adam. His counselor had encouraged him to take responsibility for his actions. The letter contained an apology that seemed genuine, but also a request to reconnect. I shared the letter with my therapist, who helped me craft a response. I accept your apology, but I'm not ready for contact. My healing has to come first. My parents tried reaching out too, through relatives and family friends. They claimed they changed, that the parenting classes had opened their eyes. But their messages always contained a hint of "let's put this behind us," as if my trauma could be erased as easily as they dismissed it before. Aunt Lisa helped me maintain boundaries, supporting my decision to focus on healing rather than force reconciliation. Family is earned, she'd say, not just given. Today, I'm preparing to start college, something that once seemed impossible when I was living in constant fear. My photography portfolio, filled with images capturing light emerging from shadows, earned me a scholarship. Dr. Chen still checks in occasionally, not as my doctor now, but as a mentor who showed me that speaking up can save your life. Mrs. Torres attended my high school graduation, crying harder than Aunt Lisa when I received honors. The scars on my back have faded to silvery lines, visible only in certain lights. Sometimes, when Sophie helps me apply sunscreen during our beach trips, she traces them gently and says, "They're like a map of your strength." I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with Adam or my parents again. That's not a decision I need to make now. What I do know is that I'm no longer the girl who accepted pain as a form of family love. Last week, I spoke at a school assembly about recognizing abuse and finding the courage to seek help. Afterward, a young girl approached me, showing me burns on her arms from her older sister's games. I held her hand and walked her to the counselor's office, just as Mrs. Torres had done for me. Because sometimes salvation comes not from enduring abuse, but from someone brave enough to say, "This isn't normal, and it needs to stop." The cycle of abuse breaks one voice at a time. Mine was heard. And now, I'm making sure others are heard too.